In the shadows of gleaming skyscrapers and neon-lit streets, something ancient still lingers. This is not folklore from the mountains, nor tales whispered by the old. This is the haunting that lives in doorways you pass every day, in the corners of elevators that stall at the wrong floor, behind school lockers that creak when no one's near, and through apartment walls so thin you swear you heard someone breathing right next to your bed. Welcome to Ghosts of Asia, where the past is never truly past. Tonight's story comes from a quiet apartment block in Seoul, where a young woman moves in for a fresh start, but every night her intercom rings. Same time, same screen, from Unit 4B. The only problem is, Unit 4B has been empty for years. Seoul in spring always seemed like it was holding its breath. The streets were waking up from the cold, and cherry blossoms had started their brief, trembling bloom. Somewhere beneath the glass towers and rust-colored brick buildings, a million lives ticked forward in silence. Rushing trains, tapping keyboards, the muted click of elevator buttons. To most, this rhythm was comfort, but for Minji, it was noise she no longer understood. She stood outside Senghwa Apartments, suitcase in hand, staring at the pale gray facade. The building wasn't new, but it was sleek and minimal, designed in that sterile style so many urban complexes had adopted in recent years. Modern but impersonal. Rows of windows glinted dully in the overcast sky. Her unit was on the 4th floor, at the far end of the hall, Unit 4C. "Fresh start," she whispered to herself. "No one here knows you. No one knows what happened." She tightened her grip on the suitcase handle and stepped inside. The lobby smelled of laminate and citrus cleaning spray, polished to a shine that reflected the overhead fluorescent lights. There was no concierge, just a digital panel for deliveries, a wall-mounted screen looping building announcements, and a small wooden table holding a dish of peppermints. Minji didn't take one. She didn't want anything sweet. The elevator opened with a cheerful ding. She entered alone. Her reflection followed her in the mirrored interior, hair slightly disheveled from the wind, dark circles beneath her eyes. She didn't look at herself too long. These days, her face felt unfamiliar. When the elevator reached the 4th floor, the doors opened into a narrow corridor, dimmer than the lobby below. The walls were painted off-white, slightly scuffed from years of suitcases and groceries brushing past. A few potted plants lined the hallway, all artificial. None of the doors bore decorations or nameplates, just numbers, etched in brushed silver. She paused briefly in front of Unit 4B. It looked exactly like the others, but something about it was stiller, as if the air around the door was thicker. The hallway light above it flickered once, then held steady. Minji stared a moment longer before shaking it off and unlocking her door next to it. Unit 4C was clean, modern, and mostly unfurnished. Just the basics: a compact kitchenette, a folding table, a sofa wrapped in plastic, and a mattress on the bedroom floor. The previous tenant had moved out a week ago. The realtor barely spoke during the handover. "Perfect for someone who values quiet," he had said, eyes flicking toward 4B before quickly changing the subject. Minji had barely unpacked by the time night fell. The sky outside turned a soft gunmetal gray, and the city lights blinked on like distant stars. She didn't turn on the television, didn't check social media. She lay on her mattress, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the ceiling. There were no sounds from the neighbors, no footsteps overhead, no muffled arguments through the walls. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of the pipes. Old buildings always had their way of complaining. She thought it would be peaceful. Instead, it felt hollow, like living inside a well where sound didn't echo, it just vanished. Sometime past midnight, she drifted into a shallow sleep, the kind where dreams don't form and the body never fully rests. That's when she heard it. Ring! A single sharp tone echoing through the apartment. She sat up. Ring! It wasn't her phone. The sound was coming from the intercom panel, mounted beside the front door. It glowed faintly. She walked over, her heart beginning to thump. She hadn't buzzed anyone in. She didn't know anyone here. Her finger hovered over the button that would activate the video feed. Then it blinked on automatically. Call from Unit 4B. The screen was grainy, as if struggling to focus. There was no one there. Just a dim view of the hallway, slightly tilted. The image jittered faintly as if the feed had been recorded rather than live. A sound emerged from the speaker, faint static, like a detuned radio. Then, underneath it, something else, a soft melody, almost a lullaby, old, sung by a child's voice just out of breath, foreign and familiar at all once. Then the screen went black. She stood there for a long moment waiting for the call to end. It didn't. The screen stayed off, but the intercom continued to hum low and constant, like it was still connected. She pressed the disconnect button. Nothing happened. Another soft click from the speaker, then silence. She unplugged the unit from the wall. The glow disappeared. The next morning, she almost convinced herself it hadn't happened. The intercom was off, her hallway was quiet. She even stood outside Unit 4B again, glancing at its doorframe, half expecting to see signs of life. Shoes, mail, a potted plant. Nothing. Still, a chill lingered in her arms as she walked past it. She went down to the first floor to check in with building management. The office was tucked behind the lobby. A glass window, a buzzer, and a clipboard of maintenance requests. An older man in a blue vest greeted her with a polite nod. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I moved into 4C yesterday." "Yes, welcome," he said without looking up. "Everything okay with the unit?" She hesitated. "Do you know if anyone lives in 4B?" The man finally looked up. His expression didn't shift. "No," he said after a pause. "No one lives there." "How long's it been empty?" He tapped the side of his pen. "Long time. Years." "Why?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He shrugged. "Some units just don't rent out. You know how it is." She nodded slowly. "I heard something strange last night from the intercom." At that, his brow furrowed. "You're sure it was 4B?" "Yes, it showed the unit number." He leaned back in his chair. Intercom system's old, glitches sometimes, especially when there's a power fluctuation. But the lights didn't go out, and the sound, she trailed off. The man's eyes lingered on her face for a moment too long. Then he smiled. "If it happens again, call us, but I wouldn't worry. Sometimes the building just talks a little." Minji returned to her apartment unsettled. The phrase, "the building just talks," echoed in her mind. That night, she sat on the floor with her dinner, instant noodles and a boiled egg, and ate in silence. She left the intercom unplugged. Her phone buzzed, a message from an old friend she hadn't seen since the breakup. She ignored it. Outside, the hallway was quiet. She tried to sleep early. At 12:17 a.m., her phone screen lit up. Unknown number. No caller ID. It rang once, then stopped. No voicemail. Minji stared at the screen, then slowly turned her head toward the front door. Even unplugged, the intercom unit glowed faintly, its screen black, but undeniably alive. And behind it, just a few feet away, behind the wall, Unit 4B waited. The intercom was still unplugged, and yet somehow the ringing echoed in Minji's memory, too clearly, too recently to forget. It had felt intrusive, not like a normal ring. It didn't ask permission. It announced itself, demanded attention, not loud, but insistent, a sound that threaded itself under her skin and refused to leave. That morning, she left her apartment early. The building's hallway was silent as always. Light from the windows at each end of the corridor was pale and indirect, the kind that never felt warm. She passed Unit 4B quickly, trying not to glance at it, though the urge gnawed at her. Curiosity was a quiet tap at the back of her mind, always whispering, "Look again, something's changed." She pushed it away. There was work to do, groceries to buy, things to occupy her time, to stop her thoughts from circling the same drain. But Seoul was noisy that day, too noisy. The street vendors outside the subway station were arguing. A busker's violin screeched through the underpass. Inside the store, a child threw a tantrum so shrill Minji had to abandon her basket and leave. Every sound irritated her, stung like static in her ears. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she missed the quiet of the apartment. That empty, strange quiet. By the time she returned to 4C, dusk had already curled its fingers through the windows. The sky bled slowly into navy, and the edges of the hallway darkened. She walked past 4B again, and this time, she stopped. Her eyes fixed on the doorknob. Stainless steel, untouched, still and perfect. But for just a moment, as she passed by, she thought she saw a smudge, like a tiny handprint, faint and oily, right below the peephole. She turned back to look again. Gone. Inside her own apartment, she locked the door, double-checked it, and finally plugged the intercom back in. The screen blinked to life. Just a welcome menu. No calls, no messages. Still, her hands were shaking. She sat on the floor beside her small folding table, a single takeout box in front of her. She ate without tasting. Each chew was mechanical, her eyes fixed on the intercom, waiting, dreading. She told herself she was being foolish, that she was just shaken from the move, from the heartbreak, from everything that came before. But even then, something inside her, deep and old and primal, kept repeating, "It wasn't a dream. It really rang. It really came from next door." She fell asleep with the bedroom light on, and at exactly 12:14 a.m., the intercom rang again. This time, it was louder, more certain. She bolted upright in bed, breath caught in her throat, her heart thudded, and the room spun slightly with the rush of adrenaline. "Ring!" She stared at the intercom through her open bedroom door. The soft glow of the screen was like a second moon in the apartment. It blinked. Call from Unit 4B. She stepped slowly into the main room, her bare feet nearly silent on the wooden floor. The screen shimmered, struggling again to stabilize the image. This time, it showed the hallway just outside. The view was from 4B's perspective. There was no one in the frame. But then, the hallway lights began to dim, one by one, starting from the far end, as if something unseen was passing beneath them. Each bulb flickered as it went out, like a dying eye. Minji's breath caught. She whispered, "No." When the light nearest her door dimmed, the screen cut to static. The audio crackled, and then came a sound, clearer now, a soft, warbled whisper, a child's voice. But the words weren't in modern Korean, not exactly. They were distorted, ancient, like a lullaby from another time. Still, Minji recognized one phrase, "Come home." The line repeated, softer each time, drawn-out vowels, gentle rhythm. Then a sound like weeping, so faint it could have been imagined. She yanked the plug from the wall again. The screen died, but the sound didn't. From somewhere in the apartment, hidden deep in the walls, the voice kept whispering, "Come home." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in the kitchen until sunrise, trembling. The next day, she returned to the management office, eyes bloodshot, her voice low and shaking. The man in the blue vest wasn't there. Instead, a younger woman in a beige cardigan greeted her, smiling too brightly. "Yes, how can I help you?" "I need to ask about the intercom system again, Unit 4B. She blinked. "4B?" Minji nodded. "There was a call. It showed on my screen, twice, late at night." "Oh, it's probably a system glitch. Happens sometimes." "No," Minji said more firmly. "It showed video, audio. Someone said something." The woman hesitated now, her expression thinning. "Well, 4B's empty. It's been empty for years." "I was told that, but the system says the calls are from there. Why would it do that?" She shrugged awkwardly. "It might be misassigned. Sometimes the wiring gets confused between floors." "That doesn't make sense," Minji muttered. "You could ask the janitor, Mr. Han. He's been here forever, knows the building's history." She handed Minji a sticky note with a name and extension number on it. Minji nodded slowly. Before she turned to leave, she asked, "Did anyone ever live in 4B?" The woman looked uncomfortable now. "Officially, no one on the lease in a long time. But people talked. Said someone tried to renovate it once. Didn't finish." "Why not?" A pause. "They said it felt wrong. The workers didn't want to stay in the unit. One of them left in the middle of the night. Quit on the spot." "What did they see?" "No one said, but I heard one of them called it the little door that always opened, whatever that means." Minji's stomach sank. "Is there a little door in the unit?" The woman shook her head. "Not that I know of." That night, Minji sat by the intercom. This time, she left it plugged in. She didn't know why. Maybe she wanted to confront it. Maybe part of her wanted to see, really see, if she had imagined it. Midnight came. Then 12:05. Then 12:12. Nothing. 12:14. Still silence. She released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Then, at 12:17, the screen blinked on without a sound. There was no ring, no warning. Just the image of the hallway. Unit 4B's camera. This time, it showed something new. A figure. A small, still silhouette seated on the floor outside the door. A young girl, hair covering her face, wearing a long, faded hanbok, the edges gray with dust. She sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them, rocking ever so slightly. Then the camera zoomed in, though Minji hadn't touched anything. The image glitched, then focused. The girl raised her head slowly, her face half obscured in shadow, eyes dark, hollow. And then she smiled. Not a child's smile, a knowing smile, a remembering smile. The feed cut. The intercom screen flashed one final message before going black. Connected. 4C has been notified. Minji didn't move for a long time. In her chest, something had shifted. Something had recognized her. And worse, she had recognized it back. Minji didn't leave the apartment for 2 days. Her groceries sat untouched in the fridge. The sunlight crept in through the blinds in slow, sterile ribbons. She barely noticed. The world outside was still spinning, a city of millions, but her own world had narrowed to 2 things: the girl on the screen and the door next to hers. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the child's silhouette, the rocking motion, the smile. Not one of joy, but recognition, as if the girl had been waiting, as if she had seen Minji before, or worse, as if she had been watching. Every night, Minji unplugged the intercom again, but the silence only made things worse. She heard whispers in the walls, soft knocks in the hallway. The pipes groaned with a rhythm too regular to be coincidence. On the 3rd morning, she finally stepped outside again. The hallway was empty, flooded with the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. But something had changed. She could feel it, in her bones, in her gut, in the pricking of her skin. She looked at Unit 4B. Its door was perfectly closed as always, but this time there was something beneath it, a small scrap of paper. She bent down slowly, heart hammering, and picked it up. It was a child's drawing, done in crayon. The paper was yellowed, creased at the edges, like it had been folded and refolded dozens of times. The image was simple, almost innocent. A little girl standing beside 2 apartment doors, 4B and 4C. She had no face, just empty circles for eyes. And between the doors, a line of red crayon, thick, heavy, scribbled over and over again. A wall, a barrier, a cage. On the back, in childish hangul, were 3 words: "Don't forget me." Minji's hands trembled. She looked around, down the hallway, toward the elevator. Empty. No footsteps, no doors opening, no sounds at all. The building was too quiet, like it was listening. She returned to her apartment and placed the drawing on the table. Then she sat down and stared at it until the sunlight faded. That evening, she decided to knock on 4B. She needed to know whether someone was playing a cruel prank, whether her mind was slipping, or whether something far older, far darker, had settled in the walls of this building. She stood before the door, hand raised, heart pounding. Then she knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence. She leaned in, listening. And then she heard it, so faint it could have been a memory. Breathing. Not gasping, not weeping. Just slow, steady breathing just behind the door. She stepped back. Her legs shook as she returned to her unit and closed the door behind her, locking it quickly. She turned on every light. The white glow felt artificial. No warmth, no comfort. And then the intercom rang. 12:17 a.m. Her breath caught. This time she didn't approach. She sat frozen at the table, watching the glow from the corner of her eye. It rang once more, then answered itself. The screen blinked on, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The image wasn't from 4B's hallway camera. It was from inside her own apartment. The angle showed her back, seated at the table, and behind her, just out of frame, was a shadow. She turned around instantly. Nothing. But when she turned back, the screen was still showing her apartment. The video feed didn't stop, it simply looped, repeating the same 12 seconds again and again. She finally mustered the strength to press the disconnect button. The screen went black. But then, a new message flashed. Camera access granted. Connection saved. She ripped the cable out of the wall. The room went dark, and for the first time since moving in, she cried. Not because she was scared, but because a part of her knew something had already stepped inside. The next morning, she made her way to the building maintenance room again. The older janitor, Mr. Hahn, was sweeping the sidewalk. "Excuse me," she said, voice hoarse. He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. "Ah, 4C, right?" She nodded. "I need to ask about Unit 4B. His broom stopped. "I already asked the office. They said it's been vacant for years, but that's not true, is it?" The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned the broom against the wall and motioned her to follow him. They stepped around to the side of the building where the sun couldn't quite reach. A small bench sat beneath a bent tree. The janitor lowered himself with a quiet grunt. "You don't look like you've been sleeping," he said. "I haven't." He nodded once, as if that was expected. "There's a reason no one lives next to 4B, he said. "You're not the first to ask, but most don't stay long enough to see anything." "I saw a girl," Minji said, "on the intercom, sitting in the hallway." The janitor's face twitched. "She still waits then." "Who is she?" Minji leaned forward. Mr. Hahn looked at the ground. "She used to live there, long time ago, back when the building was new." "With her parents?" "No," he said, "with her grandmother, a mudang, a shaman." Minji stiffened. "They said the girl was strange, quiet, never spoke at school, but she'd follow people around the building, watch them, especially children." "And then?" "She died. They say it was a fever. Others say it was something darker. The grandmother passed soon after. No one wanted the unit. It sat empty." He looked at her now. "But the girl stayed." "Her spirit?" The janitor nodded. "There's a final ritual that was never completed, a spirit-sending rite. Without it, she couldn't leave. So she's trapped. She's lonely. That's worse." A gust of wind passed through the alley, carrying a faint scent of burning incense. Mr. Hahn's eyes were distant now. "She calls out to people sometimes, especially the sad ones, the ones who've lost something." Minji's throat tightened. "What happens if they answer?" The janitor stood. "They forget what they were looking for." Then he walked away, leaving her on the bench with the wind and the quiet. That night, Minji stood once again in front of Unit 4B. She stared at the door for a long time, and for the first time, she noticed something etched in the top of the frame, so faint it was nearly invisible. A row of small carved symbols, protective sigils, worn down by time. And in the center, a circle, broken clean through, as if the protection had been fractured long ago. She reached out slowly, and placed her palm flat against the door. It was ice cold, and from deep inside, she heard it again. The voice, soft, "Come home." By the fifth night, the silence had changed. It was no longer a calm stillness, the kind that gave the body rest. It had grown heavy, thick and oppressive, like a wool blanket soaked through with fog. A silence that pressed against her ears and filled her skull, muting the world one dull throb at a time. It wasn't that the building was quiet. It was that the building was listening. Minji tiptoed through her apartment like she was trespassing in her own space. The floors creaked louder beneath her feet now, as though complaining about her presence. The refrigerator buzzed slightly off-key. Her own breath sounded too loud, too sharp. She sat by the window that overlooked the side alley where the janitor had told her the story. A small offering of rice and water sat there now, just below the bench. Someone had placed it within a circle of salt. Mr. Han, perhaps. She wondered how many other tenants had left similar offerings before vanishing quietly in the night. How many people had moved into 4C before her, and how many had heard the ringing. Her gaze flicked to the wall between her and Unit 4B. Just drywall, just wood and concrete. And yet, it pulsed with presence. She hadn't slept well in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the hallway, the child, the drawing, the whisper. She started keeping the lights on, all of them. Even then, the shadows still moved, just a little, just enough to suggest they weren't shadows at all. On the sixth night, she heard footsteps, not above her, not from the hallway, from inside her apartment. Soft, bare. She sat frozen at her small kitchen table, chopsticks paused in midair. The television played quietly in the background, volume turned low to make her feel less alone. The footsteps stopped as soon as she noticed. She turned her head slowly, heart pounding, scanning the apartment. Empty, silent. She waited a full minute before moving again. And that's when she saw it. The bathroom mirror. It was fogged over, like someone had just taken a shower, but she hadn't used it since morning. She approached with slow, careful steps. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. As she reached the bathroom doorway, she paused, feeling a sudden drop in temperature. Her skin prickled. Her breath became visible. The mirror was almost entirely fogged, except for one small handprint in the center. Tiny, child-sized. Minji reached out slowly with a trembling hand, wiping the condensation away in a single swipe. And there, in the reflection, behind her, stood the girl. Pale, motionless, dressed in her tattered hanbok, the ribbons frayed and stained with age. Minji spun around. The bathroom was empty. She turned back to the mirror. Nothing. Only her own terrified face, pale as porcelain, lips parted, eyes wide. Then, just as she stepped away, something appeared in the glass. A message, written in the fog that still clung to the corners. You left me. Minji didn't scream. She didn't run. She just sat on the bathroom floor, knees to her chest, and wept until she couldn't tell if the moisture on her face was from tears or the cold sweat rolling down her temples. That night, she didn't go to bed. She lay curled up on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the hallway where the intercom sat silent and dark. And when the clock struck 12:17 a.m., it lit up again, without ringing. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. The screen showed her hallway, again from 4B's perspective. And this time, there were two figures. One was the girl. The other was her. Standing side by side, holding hands, staring into the camera. Only the girl turned to look at the screen. Minji, the one in the video, just stood still, frozen, unblinking. The image looped once, twice, then vanished. No message, no sound, just darkness. She called her mother the next day, not to explain, she wouldn't believe any of this, but just to hear a voice from the outside world, something real. But her mother didn't answer. Instead, the call rang once, then stopped. And then her intercom buzzed. The screen lit up. Call from Unit 4B. She screamed and ripped it out of the wall before it could connect. Her phone buzzed immediately after. Unknown number. She answered, breathless, "Hello?" No response. Then a faint crackling. And over the line, her own voice whispered, "She's waiting for you to come home." She dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, screen flickering. Something was unraveling. Something was seeping in. That evening, she went down to the lobby and waited until Mr. Han appeared with his cart of supplies. He looked at her concerned before she even spoke. "She's showing you more now," he said. Minji nodded. "I saw myself in the hallway, standing next to her." "That's how she chooses," he said. "The girl chooses. She doesn't want just anyone. She wants someone who sees her, someone who understands." "I don't understand anything," Minji snapped, panic rising. "I don't know who she is, what she wants, why she keeps calling me." Mr. Han paused. "She was forgotten," he said softly, "left behind. Her spirit never crossed over. The ritual was never finished. Her soul is stuck between." "Between what?" "Between memories and oblivion," he said. "Between the world of the living and the dead. That wall between 4B and 4C, it's thin." Minji swallowed hard. "She's asking me to come home." The janitor nodded grimly. "She thinks you're someone she once knew, or someone she needs to become her. Ghosts don't always know the difference." That night, Minji locked every door, sealed every vent, covered every mirror. Still, at 12:17, the lights flickered. The intercom, unplugged, powered on anyway. Its glow filled the room with that now familiar coldness. She walked toward it as if in a trance, and on the screen this time was something new. A child's bedroom. Tatami mats, wooden shelves, toys scattered across the floor, and a single futon in the corner. A girl sat cross-legged in the middle, drawing with crayons, slowly, carefully. Minji leaned closer. The child looked up, and this time, Minji could see her face. It wasn't blurry or shadowed. It was hers. Minji's face, but younger. A child's version. Eyes wide and searching. She spoke directly to the camera in that same whisper. "I don't want to be forgotten." and the feed cut. Minji stared at the blank screen for a long time, barely able to breathe. Something was shifting. The boundary between memory and reality, between identity and possession. The girl wasn't just calling for company. She was calling for a replacement. And she had chosen Minji. The next morning, Minji opened her front door and stopped cold. There were drawings taped to it, childlike, crude, done in heavy wax crayons. They hadn't been there the night before. 6 pieces of yellowed paper, arranged in 2 uneven rows. Each picture showed a similar image, a girl in a faded hanbok, standing in a hallway, always next to a door marked 4C. Sometimes the girl was smiling, sometimes crying. One drawing showed her reaching toward the door. Another showed her curled up outside it. But it was the last drawing that made Minji's stomach twist. In it, the girl was inside the apartment, inside 4C. Minji was also there, drawn in with a pink dress and black hair. Only her face was crossed out with thick red crayon, not violently, but methodically, as if someone had tried to erase her. In the lower right corner, written in shaky Hangul, "I'm already here." Minji tore the drawings down with trembling hands. Her eyes darted toward Unit 4B. Its door was unchanged, still, silent, watching. She tried calling her mother again. This time the line didn't even ring. It just played a single recorded message. "The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check and try again." But she knew it was the right number. It had always been the right number. She tried a friend, a coworker, even her old apartment building, just to hear a human voice. Nothing connected. Every call dropped. Every number returned the same flat, soulless voice, "Not in service." Her phone showed full signal, full bars, Wi-Fi on, but the screen felt like it wasn't part of the world anymore, like she wasn't part of the world anymore. When she tried to check her old messages, the inbox was empty, not deleted, erased. She ran to her laptop and opened her email. Her account no longer existed. Even her name, when typed into a search engine, returned no results. It was as if she had never lived, as if the world was already beginning to forget her. That afternoon, the janitor found her sitting in the lobby, staring into nothing. "You're almost at the center now," he said gently. Minji looked up. "What's happening to me?" "She's pulling you in." "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "That's exactly why she chose you," he said. "You were empty when you arrived. Ghosts cling to silence. They nest in emptiness. That's where they grow strong." Minji swallowed. "What does she want?" "To be remembered, to be seen." "I see her. Isn't that enough?" Mr. Han looked away. "No, now she wants to be you." That night, Minji found a new note under her door. This time it wasn't a drawing. It was a letter, written in faded ink on brittle paper, smelling faintly of old smoke and lavender. It read, "Daughter of the forgotten, the space between walls remembers you, your face, your voice, your silence. I have no name, so I take yours. I have no room, so I take yours. I have no mother, so I call you mine." There was no signature, just a small red handprint at the bottom. She burned the letter in her sink, watching the edges curl and blacken, turning to ash. The smoke that rose from it smelled sweet, too sweet, like rotting fruit. She didn't sleep. She sat against her front door, a kitchen knife clutched in one hand, her phone in the other, though she no longer believed it would ever ring again. At 12:17 a.m., the lights in her apartment flickered once, twice, then stayed on. But her intercom didn't ring. Instead, her TV, which had been unplugged for hours, turned on by itself. The screen showed a hallway, the hallway outside her apartment. Unit 4B's door was wide open, and out of the darkness, the girl stepped forward. Not just in the video, in the hallway. Minji heard it, the soft, slow shuffle of bare feet on linoleum. She pressed her back against the door, staring through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but she could hear it, closer, breathing. She turned the lock, opened the door, and there, taped once again to her frame, was a new drawing. This one was of her face. But it wasn't drawn. It was a photograph, taken from inside her own apartment. She dropped it, looked down the hallway. 4B was closed. Not a sound, not a light, not a trace. But she knew the girl was already inside. She was no longer asking to come home. She was asking Minji to leave. The next morning, Minji tried to file a police report. She walked to the nearest station, her eyes hollow, her voice barely above a whisper. They listened, polite, professional. But when she gave her name, they frowned. "We don't have a record of that ID." She showed them her card. They scanned it. The system returned an error. They asked where she lived. She told them, Unit 4C, Sungha Apartments. They pulled up the registry. There was no record of a tenant in 4C, not for the last 6 years. Not even the address showed up in the new city database. Minji stood numb and left the station. The world was already beginning to forget her. That night, when she returned to her building, something felt different. The hallway smelled of incense. The lights above 4B no longer flickered. She approached her door slowly. Taped there was one final drawing, just a square filled in entirely with black crayon, and a line beneath it. "You're home now." Mr. Han was waiting for her the next morning. He stood beneath the bent tree in the alley behind the building, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers, eyes fixed on the concrete like it whispered things only he could hear. Minji approached slowly, drained, hollow-eyed. "I tried to report it," she said softly. "The police, the registry, even my bank account." "They don't know who you are anymore," Mr. Han said, not turning around. "She's erasing me." "She isn't just erasing you," he replied. "She's absorbing you." Minji blinked against the morning haze. "Why me?" "You're not the first," he said, "but you might be the last." He turned to face her now, and for the first time, the kindness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something darker, heavy with memory. "There were others," he said, "tenants before you, a woman named Jiun, a college student named Seok Min, a single mother and her son, all of them in 4C. All of them heard the ringing." "What happened to them?" "They stopped existing," he said simply. "First, their records vanished. Then their calls went unanswered. Then their faces changed." Minji stared. "What do you mean?" "The girl wears them," he said, voice hollow. "Piece by piece. She takes what she wants, memories, mannerisms, voices, until they stop being who they are." "And what happens to them?" "Some are trapped," he said, "like her. Others vanish completely." Minji felt her knees grow weak. "How did you survive?" He looked down at his shaking hands. "I didn't answer," he said.
I came close. I worked here at the time the girl died. I heard the screams through the wall. I saw the old woman carry her body out wrapped in silk, but I stayed away. I never entered 4B. I already did. His jaw tightened. Then there's only one thing left. They sat inside the janitor's office, a tiny room cluttered with rags, paint cans, and incense sticks. The air was thick with dust and something older, the scent of dried herbs and burned offerings. From a drawer, he pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a folded white cloth, a bowl of black rice, and the tiny shard of mirror etched with symbols Minji couldn't understand. She died before the final rite could be completed, Mr. Han said. A closing ritual, one that would have sent her spirit on, but the grandmother died too suddenly. No one else knew how. What was the ritual? Simple in form, he said, complex in intent. It requires an anchor, something of hers, a path, and someone willing to light the way back. Minji stared at the items. The rice was beginning to decay. The mirror had cracks like veins. What's the anchor? Mr. Han paused. Her bones. I don't know where she's buried. She isn't, he said. There was a long silence. What do you mean? She whispered. They never took her out, he said. They never moved her. She's still inside 4B. Minji felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. You're saying the girl's remains are still in that apartment? He nodded slowly. They're hidden behind the old closet. There's a sealed chamber built beneath the floorboards. Her grandmother tried to trap her spirit. It didn't work. Minji clutched her arms tightly. We need to finish the ritual, or she'll consume you fully. That night, Minji stood in front of Unit 4B again. The hallway was silent. The lights did not flicker. The air smelled faintly of ash and lavender. She held the key Mr. Han had given her, a rusted iron thing, heavy in her hand, ancient. She placed it in the lock, turned. The door creaked open for the first time in over a decade. The apartment was pristine, dustless. The air inside was cold, still, thick with something she couldn't name, like grief rotting behind glass. She stepped inside slowly, careful not to breathe too deeply. The walls were pale, faded wallpaper peeling in corners. On the floor, tatami mats worn smooth by time. And in the far corner, a wooden closet. It stood half open, casting a shadow that stretched too far across the room. Minji approached, every part of her screaming not to. Inside the closet was an empty futon, but the floor beneath it was slightly raised. She dropped to her knees, pressed her hand against the wooden panel. It gave slightly. She found the seam, pulled. A hidden compartment revealed itself, a square space just large enough to hold a small body. Inside, wrapped in silk and straw, were the crumbling remains of a child. Minji trousered her mouth. The bones were delicate, and next to them, resting gently on the child's chest, was a flip phone. Its surface scratched, battery corroded, still powered on, still glowing. As she reached for it, it buzzed once. A single new message appeared on the screen. You're late. Minji backed away, but the door behind her slammed shut. The temperature plummeted, the walls groaned, and from the shadows of the room, the girl appeared. Not a ghostly form,
but flesh and bone, pale and silent. She stood barefoot on the tatami, her head tilted, her long black hair hiding half her face. She looked at Minji, then pointed toward the bones, then pointed to herself, then back to Minji. The message was clear. Trade. Minji shook her head. "No," she said, whispered. "You're not forgotten. I see you. I see you." The girl tilted her head the other way. She stepped closer. Her mouth moved. No sound, only the motion of lips forming one phrase again and again. "Come home. Come home. Come home." Minji dropped to her knees and placed the ritual bowl of black rice at the base of the chamber. She unfolded the white cloth, lit the incense stick, recited the prayer Mr. Han had taught her. The symbols on the mirror shimmered faintly. The girl stood still, watching, breathing, waiting. Minji reached forward and gently touched the bones. "I remember you, and I won't let you be lost again." The air split with a soundless scream. The incense flared, and the girl disappeared. Not violently, not in rage. She simply faded, like steam into light. And the phone, still clutched in Minji's hand, went dark. The door to 4B opened. Minji stepped out. The hallway was brighter, lighter, like something had been released. She turned to close the door behind her, and for the first time she noticed the nameplate beside it, carved in Old Hangul. Na Unji, 2001 to 2011. For the first time in weeks, Minji slept. It wasn't a peaceful sleep. It wasn't deep or dreamless, but it was real. And when she woke, the silence was still there, but it was different now. Less oppressive, less watchful. The kind of quiet that belongs to early mornings, to rooms where grief had finally exhaled. The apartment felt lighter, not healed, not safe, but no longer poisoned. She moved slowly, her body aching from exhaustion, her throat dry. The memories of the night before played in flickers. The hidden chamber, the bones, the girl's expressionless face. Had she truly performed the ritual? Had it worked? She checked the intercom. It was still unplugged, still dark. For now, that was enough. She spent most of the day cleaning, not out of fear, but necessity. Wiping down counters, throwing out uneaten food, folding blankets she'd left crumpled on the floor. She scrubbed the tiles in the bathroom, vacuumed under the bed, as though reclaiming the space with each small task, as though trying to anchor herself back into reality. But when she entered the bathroom, she paused. The mirror. She hadn't uncovered it since the incident with the handprint. For a moment she hesitated, then slowly she peeled the towel away. The glass was clean, still. Her reflection looked normal, pale, but grounded. She leaned closer, studying the details of her face, her eyes, her lips, the faint scar on her jawline from a childhood fall. Then, her reflection blinked. But she hadn't. Minji froze. She stepped back, and the reflection stayed still. Then slowly, unnaturally, tilted its head to the left. Minji didn't move. The reflection smiled. Not her smile. The girl's. It lifted one hand, palm out, and pressed it against the glass. Minji felt a coldness ripple across her spine. A whisper echoed faintly in her ears. Not finished. She stumbled backward, heart pounding, nearly slipping on the bathroom tiles. The reflection returned to normal. She looked again, just herself. But the word echoed in her mind like a curse. Not finished. She left the bathroom and slammed the door behind her. The light above flickered. That evening, she sought out Mr. Hahn again. She found him in the utility basement, organizing rusted pipes and coiled wires. He looked up when she entered, as if he'd been expecting her. "She spoke again," Minji said. He sighed. "She's not gone, is she?" "No," he said softly. "She let go of her body, but not her anger." "I saw her, in the mirror." He nodded. "Mirrors are bridges. We used to cover them during funerals. Spirits get stuck inside. Some never leave." "I thought the ritual ended it." "It ended one part," he said, "but her resentment, the ache of abandonment, that lingers." Minji sat down on an old metal stool. "Then what do I do?" "There's one final thing," he said. "You need to give her a name." Minji blinked. "She had a name, Na-Nji. I saw it on the door." "She had a name when she lived, but not as a spirit. No one ever spoke it, not during mourning, not during the ritual. A forgotten name becomes a curse, a ghost with no voice." Minji whispered, "Then I speak it now?" He nodded. "At night, in front of a mirror, with intention. You must call her not as a stranger, but as someone who sees her, remembers her. Not with fear, but with compassion." Minji nodded slowly. That night, she lit a single candle and placed it on the bathroom sink. The lights were off. Only her face glowed in the mirror, soft, trembling in the flicker of flame. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Na-Un-Ji, I remember you." Nothing happened. She closed her eyes, said it again, "Na-Un-Ji, I see you." The candle flickered violently. A soft breeze moved through the sealed room. When she opened her eyes, the girl stood behind her. In the mirror only, not in the room. Her face was no longer vacant, no longer angry, just sad, like a child too long forgotten. Minji pressed her hand to the glass. The girl mirrored the gesture. For the first time, their palms aligned, and as the flame burned low, the girl's image began to fade. Not violently, not in torment, just softly, like a memory finally released. And with her final breath, the girl whispered, "Thank you, sister." Minji woke the next morning with tears on her face. She didn't remember dreaming, but she remembered holding someone's hand, and it was warm. It should have been over. The ritual, the mirror, the name. The girl had faded, not with violence, but with silence. A passing, not a banishment. Minji had felt the weight lift from her chest that night, as if something invisible had finally loosened its grip on her lungs. But peace has a way of feeling unfamiliar after terror. And Minji couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered. Inside Unit 4B. She had been inside before, but only to perform the ritual. She hadn't stayed. She hadn't looked around. And now, something pulled her back. Not fear, not duty. Something quieter. A kind of grief. The hallway felt different now, less cold, less hostile, but still hollow, the way an abandoned playground feels on a cloudy afternoon, empty yet echoing with memory. She used the iron key again. The lock clicked more easily this time, as if the apartment recognized her, welcomed her. The door creaked open. Minji stepped inside. No resistance, no shadow, just silence. But it wasn't the silence from before. It was the silence that follows a child's funeral, the kind that respects, not restrains. She removed her shoes and stepped carefully across the tatami mats. They groaned slightly under her weight, but not in protest. The walls, once sharp with mildew and dust, now bore the faint scent of incense and sun-dried fabric. The air was still, but breathable. And for the first time, she truly looked. There were small things, scattered toys in the corner, now faded with time. A wooden cup with a chipped rim resting beside a pillow. A bookshelf with one row of children's books, mostly picture stories, some with torn covers and pages that had been lovingly taped back together. And on the far wall, opposite the closet where the bones had been, were the drawings. Hundreds of them, taped side by side, row upon row, layer upon layer. Some had fallen and scattered across the floor. Others clung stubbornly to the wallpaper, curling at the corners, the tape yellowed and brittle. Minji stepped closer. Each drawing showed the girl, Unji, sometimes alone, sometimes outside 4C, sometimes holding hands with her, Minji, or versions of her. In one drawing they shared a meal. In another they played jacks. In one, Unji sat on Minji's lap, eyes closed like a child listening to a bedtime story. It wasn't just haunting, it was longing. All this time the girl hadn't wanted to hurt her. She had wanted to be her, to share her space, her warmth, her name, to not be left behind again. Minji felt tears burn in her throat. She crouched and began to gather the fallen drawings, one by one, not to throw away, but to place gently on the desk nearby, stacking them with care. As she lifted the last one, something fluttered out from behind it. A photograph. Real, old, curled at the edges. It showed a young woman, early 20s, with a kind smile and tired eyes, holding a small girl in her arms. The woman was not Unji's grandmother. She was Minji's mother. The child was Minji. But next to her, pressed against her side, almost out of frame, was a second girl, Unji, smiling, holding Minji's hand. The room swayed. Minji sat down on the floor, the photo trembling in her fingers. It wasn't possible. Had they known each other? She stared at the woman in the picture again. It was definitely her mother. Same nose, same eyes. She flipped the photo over. In faded ink, someone had written, "Spring Picnic, 2006. Minji and Unji, best friends." Her vision blurred. She had no memory of this, none. But something stirred in the back of her mind, an image of a girl in a green hanbok, a voice whispering stories about tigers and fox spirits, a song sung softly under a peach tree. Buried, forgotten. Unji had not been a stranger. She had been her childhood friend, lost to time, erased by trauma, covered over by years and grief and silence. Minji had moved away that year, after her father left, after her mother changed, after the accident. She remembered nothing else until now. The intercom buzzed, but not from her unit, from inside 4B. She stepped toward it, pressed the answer button. The screen remained black, but the audio clicked on. Static. Then, a voice. Her own. "I'm sorry I forgot you. I didn't mean to. I was only a child." Minji blinked. She wasn't speaking, but the voice continued as if reading her heart. "I remember now. The songs, the games, your drawings, the day you hid my shoes and we laughed until we cried. I remember." The speaker crackled. A second voice came through. Soft, familiar. "Unji. Then I can go now." Minji felt warmth rush through her body. A breeze stirred the papers on the desk. The drawings fluttered once, then stilled. The room grew brighter, not with light, but with peace. And for the first time, Minji felt no presence. Not watching, not hiding, just stillness and silence. She closed the door to 4B gently behind her, not as a ward, not in fear, as a friend saying goodbye. And on the way back to her unit, she passed the janitor in the hallway. He didn't say a word, just nodded once, respectfully, as if honoring a soul finally laid to rest. Minji thought it had ended. After the ritual, the mirror, the name, and the truth, something had lifted. The air in her apartment no longer stung her lungs. The hallway no longer watched her. Unit 4B, once a sealed box of sorrow and rot, now stood quiet, no longer empty, but no longer hungry. And yet, something remained. She felt it in her fingertips when she touched the walls, in the soft creaks at night, in the way the temperature still dropped just before midnight. Not dangerous, not violent, but unfinished. 1 week after the final visit to 4B, Minji was cleaning again. She had finally begun to reclaim her space, not just cleaning, but rearranging furniture, adding new light fixtures, trying to make 4C hers again. As she was moving the small cabinet beside the front door, something caught her eye. A black flip phone, half crushed, had fallen behind the cabinet. She froze. It was old, early 2000s style, scratched plastic, dull buttons, and yet, somehow, powered on. The screen flickered with a faint glow, faint green text on gray. One new voicemail. She didn't own a phone like this. She had never seen this one before. She touched it. It was cold. Not room temperature cold, bone-deep cold. She opened the flap with trembling fingers. No dial tone, no service bars, just that blinking notification. Her thumb hovered over the button, then pressed it. The phone rang. Not the phone in her hand, the intercom. Still unplugged, still dead, but it rang anyway. The screen lit up. Call from unknown. No number, no unit, just that single word. She stood in the center of the room, caught between the phone in her hand and the glowing intercom on her wall. The voicemail auto-played. At first, static. Then, her own voice. "I'm sorry I forgot you." The same phrase from the ritual night, the same cadence. I remember now. Then silence. Then another voice. Not Unji, not Minji. Something older, slower. A woman. Creaking like wood, whispering like wind between floorboards. She wasn't the only one. The voicemail ended, the intercom disconnected, and the flip phone, now visibly deteriorating, cracked slightly in her hand. Minji stared at it. What did that mean? She wasn't the only one. That night she went to Mr. Han again. He was in the basement fixing an exposed pipe. When he saw the phone in her hand, he went still. "You found it," he said quietly. "You knew it was there?" He nodded slowly. "I hoped it was gone." Minji sat across from him, the phone resting between them like a dormant insect. She said she wasn't the only one. "She wasn't," he confirmed. "Unji was the loudest, but she wasn't the first, and she wasn't the last." Minji's throat tightened. Then who? Mr. Han lit a cigarette, not to smoke, but to fill the space with something tangible. This building wasn't always apartments. It was a school, decades ago, before the fires, before the construction company bought the land. There were deaths. What kind of deaths? He looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Forgotten ones, the kind that don't make the papers, the kind that are covered with cement and bureaucracy. Children? He nodded. Minji pressed her palms together, trying to steady her breath. So this wasn't about one ghost. "No," he said. "It never is. Hauntings are not isolated. They're echoes. The more that are forgotten, the more that come back. And now that Unji is gone, there's space," he finished grimly, "and the others have noticed." That night, Minji didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, the phone clutched in her hands. It was dead now, the screen blank, the crack had deepened, and a piece of the hinge flaked off in her palm. And yet, it felt warm, alive. She placed it on her nightstand and lay back, eyes wide open, waiting. At 12:17 a.m., the intercom lit up, but it didn't ring. It just blinked. "Incoming call, room 3A." Minji stood up. She didn't know anyone in 3A. She wasn't even sure if it was occupied. The screen showed a hallway, not hers, one floor below. Dusty, dim, unused. A single door stood open at the end. And inside the darkness, movement. A figure. Not a child. A woman. Hair long and tangled. Body hunched, crawling toward the camera. Her face was obscured by shadow, but her mouth moved. Minji turned up the volume. Static. Then words, soft and distant. "I died alone. They buried me in silence. No stone, no name. Call me back. Call me back." The image distorted. The intercom turned off, and the flip phone beside her vibrated once, then again. She opened it. The screen lit up one final time. New contact saved. Mother. Then it powered off completely. Minji stared at the dead device, her mind spiraling. First Unji, now someone else. The building wasn't haunted by a single ghost. It was layered, like wallpaper, like grief. Each soul trapped in silence, waiting to be named, to be heard, to be mourned. She looked toward the wall, toward 4B. It was no longer a threat. It had become a beacon. And they were beginning to gather. Minji used to think ghosts were simple. A figure in the dark, a cold breath, a single death wrapped in tragedy and unfinished business. But now she understood. Ghosts weren't singular. They weren't isolated. They were residue, grief unspoken, names unremembered, echoes of rituals never completed. And Unit 4B had become the space where they all whispered. She spent the next day searching not for modern answers, but ancient ones, rituals, traditions, the way her ancestors had dealt with the dead, before phones, before cement, before soul became a skeleton of neon and glass built atop bones. She found something old, a reference in a folklore archive, a tradition among village shamans known as Guanhon Sangje, the rites of 4 key transitions: birth, coming of age, marriage, and death. But death had its own layers, and when a death was sudden, unwitnessed, or unmourned, it required an additional rite, Grunhonje, the marriage of the dead, a ceremony to bind the spirit of the forgotten to a symbolic union, not to another person, but to the memory of the living, to keep them from becoming lost in bitterness. Minji read the passage again and again. When a spirit has no one to call its own, it must be called into memory by the living, offered a place to reside through voice, flame, and vow. It wasn't about appeasing a ghost. It was about giving it a place to belong. She thought of Eun-ji, of the girl who'd waited outside her door night after night, drawing pictures of connection. She'd never wanted revenge. She'd wanted remembrance. But there were others now, and Eun-ji had only been the beginning. Minji went to Mr. Han again. This time, he didn't look surprised when she knocked on the door of his supply room. "You've seen her," he said before she spoke. "The other one." Minji nodded. 3A. Mr. Han leaned back in his chair. "We walled it off 10 years ago. No one lives there anymore." "She's still there." He looked at her with tired eyes. "They all are." Minji took a deep breath. "There was a ritual, wasn't there? Something that was supposed to be done when the building was converted?" He hesitated. "Yes, but it was never finished." "Why?" He rubbed his hands together. "Because the developers didn't believe in such things. They tore down the old structure, the school, the courtyard, the shrine. They ignored the elders, said tradition was bad for business. And the spirits stayed? Some did more than stay, he said. They multiplied, fed on each other, became nesting ghosts, spirits who hold open doors for others. Eun-ji was just the one who knocked loudest." Minji's hands were cold. "Then we need to finish the ritual." Mr. Han looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "I'll help you, but it must be done right, at the right hour, with the right intention. This isn't a banishment, it's a binding, a promise." "To do what?" "To remember them," he said, "to speak their names, to carry them in story. That's how you marry a forgotten spirit back into the world." They set the altar inside Unit 4B, because, of course, it had to be there, the spiritual heart of the haunting. Mr. Han helped her clean the space. They cleared a square of tatami in the center, placed a white cloth, lit a circle of candles, one for each known spirit who had died in the building. Yoonji, the mother from 3A, the schoolboy who drowned in the construction trench, the janitor's assistant who disappeared, and the unnamed child whose shoes were found behind the drywall. 5 flames, 5 forgotten. Minji brought offerings, bowls of sweet rice, red bean buns, a cup of barley tea, and then she added something of her own, a photo album, blank at first, but with space to write. To give them story, she said. Mr. Han nodded. At exactly 12:17 a.m., they began. Minji read the names, the ones they knew, and then offered space for those they didn't. She whispered a promise. You are remembered. You are named. You belong not to the silence, but to the memory. You have a place. I will carry your story. The air grew heavy. The candles flickered. And for one moment, one brief, aching second, Minji felt them all. Not as shadows, not as threats, but as presence, a weight in the air, a warmth in her chest. And then nothing. The flames settled, the air cleared, and outside, the hallway lights flickered back on. Minji sat alone in 4B for a while after Mr. Han left. The room didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt filled, not with spirits, but with story, with memory, with names. The phone she had once found behind her cabinet now rested on the altar, no longer buzzing, no longer ringing, just still. And beside it, the first page of the photo album now held a single drawing, a girl in a green hanbok, smiling, holding Minji's hand. Beneath it, in careful writing, Eunji, not forgotten. It began with the smell of incense. Minji had just returned from work. It was late, almost midnight, and the city outside her window buzzed faintly beneath a veil of mist. She took off her shoes, let her bag drop to the floor, and paused mid-step. The scent was unmistakable. Not her own incense, not lavender or sandalwood. This was older, earthier, funeral incense. The kind burned during mourning rites, thick, sweet smoke that clung to fabric and memory alike. She turned slowly toward the wall that connected her unit to 4B. The smell was coming from inside her apartment. She followed it toward the living room. There, resting on the center of her low table, was a small white dish she hadn't placed, and on it, perfectly arranged, were 3 items: a slice of persimmon, dried and sweet, a tiny rice cake folded with red bean, a burnt match still smoldering slightly, and beneath them, a piece of parchment, folded, tied with red thread, her name written across the top. Not in pen, in ash. Minji didn't touch it. Her body refused. She stared at the offering, because that's what it was, an offering, but not her offering. Someone or something had placed it for her. She backed away slowly, the floor beneath her creaking in complaint. She locked the door, closed the windows, checked every cupboard, closet, and corner of the apartment. No one was there, but the smell remained, and the ash letter sat quietly on the table like a silent contract, a gift or a warning. She called Mr. Han. He answered on the first ring. "It left something for me," she said. He didn't ask what. Didn't need to. "What time is it?" he asked. 12:13. "Don't open it," he said. "Not yet. Wait until 12:17. Minji's breath caught. Why that time? Because that's when she first rang the intercom. That hour belongs to the in-between, a crack between days. If it's a real offering, it will reveal itself then. And if it's not, then it's a binding. Minji stared at the ash letter. And what happens if I open it early? Mr. Han was quiet for a long time. Then he said simply, "You'll belong to her." Minji waited. She sat cross-legged on the floor, 5 minutes feeling like 5 years, the incense smoke curling in slow spirals above the table. The candlelight flickered. 12:16. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply. 12:17. She opened the letter. The ash lettering crumbled slightly as she untied the red thread. Inside, a single page, blank. Then, slowly, words began to form, not written, appearing, fading into view like breath on glass. "You gave me a name. You gave me peace. But there are others still hungry. They gather behind the walls. They wait in silence. You must finish what was started." Minji's pulse quickened. More text appeared. One must offer. One must witness. One must remember. Then a final line. "If you do not choose, they will choose for you." The letter disintegrated in her hands, crumbled to dust. The incense smell vanished, and the silence returned. The next day, Mr. Han placed a small earthen bowl in her hands. Inside, salt, ashes, and a single red string. "This is for protection. You'll need it." "Protection from what?" "From memory," he said. "Once you open the door to the forgotten, they don't always stay where they were." "I thought I was helping them." "You are," he said. "But some memories weren't meant to be found. Some are twisted, hungry. Not every ghost is grateful." Minji nodded slowly. "What do I have to do?" He looked at her, eyes shadowed with things he would never fully say aloud. "You must give them a home." "A home?" He held up a wooden box, small, hand-carved, lined with black silk. "A vessel for the lost." She stared. "You want me to keep them?" "No, not forever," he said. "Just long enough to remember them, to give them story, to let them pass." She took the box. It was heavier than it looked, cold, and as she held it, she swore she heard breathing from inside. That night, she lit 5 candles again, this time in her own apartment. She placed the earthen bowl in the center, the wooden vessel beside it, and then she spoke. Not loud, but with intention. "I offer this space to memory, to those whose names were never spoken, to those buried in silence, to the ones still knocking." She placed her hand over the bowl. The salt shifted. The ash stirred. And then she heard it. A knock from behind her. From the wall. From 4B. Not violent. Not angry. Just present. She didn't move. Didn't answer. But whispered, "I hear you." The knock came again, then stopped. And in the candlelight, the wooden box creaked. Its lid lifted slightly. Inside now sat a single item. A child's shoe. Old, worn, burned at the edges. Minji reached in. Underneath the shoe was a paper tag, blank. She took a pen, and for the first time gave the object a name. Yu-chan, boy, age 9, never claimed, never found. The candle nearest her flickered once, then went still. And somewhere behind the wall, a voice whispered, "Thank you." She woke up in the wrong apartment. At first, Minji didn't realize it. She opened her eyes slowly to soft morning light and the familiar groan of the city beyond the glass. The air was cool, her blanket warm. For a few seconds, everything felt normal, until she sat up and noticed the walls were not hers. The layout was similar, nearly identical, in fact, but the colors were off. The curtains were blue, not gray. The table in the corner had iron legs, not wood. And on the far wall, a framed picture of someone else's family stared back at her. She stood, slowly. The floor beneath her feet creaked in a new pattern. A clock ticked quietly above the door, one she didn't own. She walked to the window. The view was wrong. Same street, same skyline, but she was facing west, not east. Panic began to bloom. She rushed to the door and yanked it open, and there, mounted beside the entrance, cold and metallic, was a small silver plaque, Unit 4B. Minji staggered backward. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She turned, looked around the apartment again, this time noticing the subtle shifts. There were no personal belongings, no toothbrush, no dishes, no clothes, only furniture, sparse, soulless, like a model home waiting to be staged. And on the floor beside the entrance, the wooden vessel, still closed, still sealed. She picked it up carefully. It was warm. She opened the door again and stepped out into the hallway. It was the 4th floor, yes, but the air felt different, stale, compressed, like a place caught between memory and reality. She walked down the corridor, her footsteps soft on the scuffed vinyl. The lights above buzzed faintly, flickering with no rhythm. When she reached Unit 4C, she stopped. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, she could hear movement, the rustle of papers, the clink of a spoon in a cup. She pushed it open slowly. A woman sat at the small table, sipping tea, flipping through a photo album. Minji couldn't see her face, only her back, her long dark hair falling in soft waves. But the way she held herself, the way she moved, it was familiar, too familiar. "Hello?" Minji whispered. The woman froze, then turned, and Minji stared into her own face, but younger, calmer, smiling, as if nothing had ever happened. The other Minji tilted her head. "You're early," she said. Minji's lips parted. "What is this?" The other Minji stood, closing the photo album gently. "You opened the door," she said. "You made the offerings. You remembered them. So now you get to stay." "Stay?" Minji repeated. "Stay where?" The other Minji stepped closer. "In the between," she said. "The others went on, but someone always has to keep the door open. Someone always has to witness." Minji backed away. "I didn't agree to that." "But you did," the other whispered. "With every name, every story, every bowl of rice. You invited them, and now they need you." "I want to go back." The smile faded. "There is no back." Minji turned and ran, out of 4C, down the hallway, toward the elevator. But the buttons didn't respond. The lights inside flickered erratically. She tried the stairwell, locked. She banged on every door. No one answered. No one existed. The building was empty, except for her. And her. Hours passed, or maybe none did. Time was strange here. She returned to the apartment, to 4B. It was the only door that opened. She sat on the floor beside the wooden vessel, holding it close. The carvings on the lid pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips. She whispered, "Please, let me out." Nothing answered. Then she opened the box. Inside, instead of items or ash, was a mirror. A small circular shard, just enough to reflect a sliver of her face. But the reflection wasn't hers. It was the other Minji, smiling. Behind her, more figures began to appear in the mirror, faint silhouettes. A boy with no shoes, a woman with burned hands, a child holding a string of bells, a man with hollow eyes, all watching, waiting, not hostile, not kind, just present. Minji closed the lid and began to weep. The next morning, if it was morning, someone knocked on her door. She opened it. Mr. Han stood there, but older, tired. His hair had gone gray, his face thinner. He looked at her with sad recognition. "You stayed," he said. Minji stared. "How long has it been?" "For you?" he asked. "A day. For me, 10 years. Her knees buckled. He caught her. "You kept them safe," he said. "You remembered them. Because of you, they didn't fade." "I want to go back," she sobbed. "I know," he said. "But some doors only open once, and some offerings can't be returned." And so she stayed, in 4B, the room that no one ever saw, the apartment that never had a tenant, the intercom that always rang at 12:17. She never aged, never slept, never ate, but she remembered. Every name, every story, every forgotten soul who passed through her door. And when someone new moved into 4C, the intercom would ring, just once, and her voice, soft, familiar, would whisper through the speaker, "Come home." There was a time Minji thought she had vanished, but she hadn't, not completely. She had become a shadow behind a screen, a voice behind a door, a name whispered too softly to remember. She was no longer listed in databases, no longer received calls, and her reflection no longer looked quite like her, but part of her remained, anchored by grief, by memory, by ritual, and by the recording. It began again, as it always did, with the soft buzz of the intercom. A new tenant had moved into 4C. A young woman, tired eyes, boxes still unpacked. Minji, or the thing she had become, watched her through the peephole that was no longer attached to a real wall, from a space that existed between seconds. And then came the ring, 12:17 a.m. The woman on the other side backed away. The recording continued. I don't know who you are, not yet, but if you've moved into this building, if you're in 4C, then it's already begun. The static sharpened. This place remembers, even when the world forgets. Names, faces, children, mothers. The dead don't sleep here, they wait. Minji's voice now lower. They wait for someone who listens. The image cut. The intercom buzzed again. The new tenant didn't answer. Instead, she went to the building office, asked questions, the way Minji once had. She was told the same things. No one lives in 4B. It's been vacant for years. The system glitches sometimes. But the recording didn't glitch. It lived in the CCTV archive, buried beneath folders mislabeled and misdated. It wasn't supposed to be there, and yet it always was. Footage from the hallway, dated the night Minji moved in, dated the night she was last seen. She watched it from the lobby console, her hands trembling. The video showed her, a younger version, disoriented, anxious, stepping out of the elevator, stopping at 4B, then at 4C, then turning back. The angle widened as if someone else had adjusted the camera. She stood in the hallway, frozen for a moment. Then she turned toward the lens and smiled. Not a wide smile, not malevolent, but knowing, final. Then she reached out and covered the camera with her hand. The screen went black. End of file. Mr. Han found the new tenant crying in the stairwell. She told him she'd seen someone in her apartment, someone who looked like her, sitting in the dark, staring through the mirror. He said nothing, only placed a candle in her hand and whispered, "Don't forget her name." She asked, "What name?" He hesitated, then said it out loud as if exhaling something sacred. Minji. The next night, the intercom rang again. Same time, same screen, same face. Minji. This time, she spoke clearly, directly. I didn't mean to stay. I only wanted to help. I remembered them, and they remembered me. And now I remember you. The woman on the other side stepped closer, almost touched the screen. Be careful what you open. Not every door leads out. The feed glitched, but before it cut completely, the screen flashed a message. Connection saved. Then darkness. Inside Unit 4B, the air remained still, the room unchanged. But on the table beside the faded futon, the wooden vessel slowly opened. Inside, another mirror shard. Another offering. Another name waiting to be spoken. And Minji's voice, no longer alone, whispered into the silence. I see you. I remember you. I am still here. The building changed tenants, as it always did. New faces, new names, new lives carried in cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. Laughter in the stairwell. Arguments behind paper-thin walls. The scent of fresh ramen and tired ambition rising through the vents. Life pressed forward, but some things never moved. Unit 4B remained locked, vacant, untouched, unspoken. The management office said it was under long-term renovation. No one asked further. No one questioned the absence of contractors. No one ever saw the door open, except at night, except when it was her turn to ring. In Unit 4C, a new tenant unpacked. Jisoo, 29, a freelance graphic designer with too little sleep and too many regrets. She had moved here after a breakup, after a failed project, after a year that had stretched her thin. She wanted quiet. Songhua Apartments offered silence in abundance. No noisy neighbors, no barking dogs, no curious questions. Her unit was clean, spare, just enough light, just enough space to disappear. She liked it, until the intercom rang. The first time, she didn't answer. She was brushing her teeth. The sound made her freeze. A shrill digital ring from the device mounted beside her door. She rinsed, spat, and approached slowly. Call from Unit 4B. She frowned. She hadn't met anyone from 4B, hadn't seen anyone enter or leave. The screen showed nothing but static. She unplugged the unit, shrugged it off, went to bed. But that night, her dreams were not her own. A hallway, a child's voice, a soft whisper, "Come home." The second night, the call came again, 12:17 a.m. Exactly. The screen lit up even though it had been unplugged. Again, the words, "Call from Unit 4B." This time, she pressed the button. The screen showed a girl, not a child, not a ghost, a woman, face pale, eyes deep with grief and patience. She stood in a hallway bathed in gray light. Behind her, doors stretched in both directions. She looked into the camera, spoke gently. "If you're hearing this, then you've opened the door." Jisoo stepped back. The woman on screen tilted her head. "Don't be afraid. I was like you. I lived in this unit. I saw things, heard things. I tried to help." Her voice cracked, only slightly. "And now, I wait." The screen went dark. Jisoo searched the next day, asked the building office, "Is there someone in 4B?" "No," the clerk said. "It's been empty for a long time." "How long?" The woman hesitated. "Since 2015, I think." Jisoo frowned. "Who lived there last?" The woman shrugged. "No one officially. The records are strange." She paused, then added, "We tell new tenants not to answer calls from that unit." Jisoo's voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" The clerk looked at her, smiled awkwardly, and said, "Because she always answers." Jisoo returned to her apartment with a chill in her bones. She paced for an hour. then sat by the intercom, waiting. When the clock hit 12:17, it rang. She pressed the button. The woman appeared again. Same expression, same hallway. But this time, she held something in her hands. A small wooden box. She opened it slowly. Inside, a mirror shard. And in its surface, Jisoo saw herself. Not the reflection she knew, but older, paler, hollow-eyed, watching, waiting. "You can walk away now," the woman said, "or you can remember." Jisoo whispered, "Remember what?" The woman looked up, smiled gently. "Them, me, yourself." The feed glitched, cut out. The intercom shut down. But the mirror on Jisoo's dresser cracked down the center. And through the crack, she saw the woman still staring back at her. In Unit 4B, the walls held secrets. Behind the closet, the floor creaked faintly. The futon was untouched, but on the small table sat the wooden vessel. It opened on its own. Inside, a paper tag, blank, waiting for a name. And far below, in the building's archive room, the CCTV files updated automatically. A new folder appeared, labeled with today's date. Inside, one recording. A hallway, a tenant, and a woman whispering through the static, "Come home." So if you ever move into a building that feels too quiet, if your neighbors never say hello, if your intercom rings at 12:17 from a unit the management says is vacant, don't answer, because it's not a mistake. It's not a glitch. She's not asking for help. She's asking for your name. Because once you open the door, once you speak, once you listen, you become part of the story. And stories, once started, don't always end. Not in Songhwa Apartments. Not in Unit 4B. Where the screen still glows, the vessel still waits, and the voice, soft, steady, sorrowful, always whispers back, "Come home."